This is not just the story of a fallen woman. It is the story of how God saw faith, in the ruins of a cursed city. When the world saw shame, heaven saw salvation. When Jericho's gates closed tight in fear, God's mercy was already walking through them, disguised in a story no one expected. Have you ever felt too stained to be forgiven? Too broken to be chosen? Have you ever wondered if your past disqualified you from God's plan? Then listen closely, because Rahab's story was written for you. She lived in the shadows of a sinful city, but her faith pierced the darkness like a scarlet thread of hope. A prostitute, rejected by men, forgotten by the righteous, yet remembered by God. This is not a tale of judgment. It's a revelation of mercy. A portrait of grace drawn with the trembling hands of a woman who dared to believe that even she could be saved. Because Rahab's scarlet cord still preaches today. It tells us that no one is too far gone. No sin too dark. No past too stained. For the God who turns disgrace into destiny. This is the story of Rahab, the woman whose scarlet cord still preaches grace today. Israel's second chance. After Moses died, the people stood at a crossroad. A generation of wandering had ended, and a new chapter was about to begin under a different name, Joshua. He was not Moses. He carried no thunder from Sinai, no staff that split seas. He carried a promise and a steadier heart. 40 years before, fear had stolen their victory. When Moses sent spies, the land seemed too large, the people too strong. As one voice rose above the crowd, Caleb spoke with boldness, "We should go up and take possession of the land." But the fear spoke louder in other mouths, "We can't attack those people, they are stronger than we are." Numbers had been written by tears and delay, a whole generation had waited because doubt had won the day. Now the story moved forward. Joshua would not repeat the mistake. He knew the cost of fear. He knew that courage is not the absence of trembling, but the choice to move when trembling remains. So he sent spies again, not 12 this time, not a public parade, but 2 men under the cover of night. So he sent 2 men secretly from Shittim, the record says. Simple words. Quiet footsteps. Hidden purpose. Listen to what that silence means. No trumpets, no banners, only shadows slipping past sleeping guards and moonlight cutting across a dry riverbed. The mission was small in number but great in consequence. A single whispered report could tilt the fate of an entire nation. 2 hearts, 2 feet, 1 choice to step across a border that had been promised and not yet possessed. Jericho loomed ahead, a city of fame and fear. Its walls were thick with pride, its gates heavy with confidence. To the world, Jericho was an impenetrable belly of power. But to God, strong cities were no match for faith when faith stepped forward. The spies moved like whispers through the night because sometimes God's work begins in the quiet. He does not always announce his plans with trumpets. Often he begins with 2 men walking in the dark, a rope tied to a window, a promise made in a rooftop hush. What seemed small to the eyes of men, a secret scouting mission, a hidden rope, the choice of a single woman, would become the hinge upon which history turned. Think about that, history bent on the shoulders of invisible courage. The old generation's excuse was numbers and giants. The new generation's answer would be the courage to believe what the Lord had already declared. Joshua's sending of those 2 men was more than military intelligence, it was a test of whose God the people would follow, the God of fear, or the God who parts seas and levels walls. So the 2 walked beneath the moon, their sandals whispering on the ground, carrying nothing but a report and the hope of a nation. And far beyond them, within a city of many voices, 1 home would become a refuge. 1 woman's faith, unexpected, imperfect, and daring, would meet the spies in the dark and change everything. This is how God often works, not with many, but with the right few. Not with noise, but with faith that listens. Not with the proud, but with the humble who are brave enough to believe. The Covenant of Mercy. That night, the city of Jericho slept behind its mighty walls, proud, confident, unaware that its destiny was hanging by a scarlet thread. But in one small house built into the wall, a woman made a choice that would change history. When the king's soldiers came knocking, Rahab's heart pounded. They demanded, "Bring out the men who came to you." But she had already hidden them under the stalks of flax laid on her rooftop, a risky act, punishable by death. Yet Rahab didn't act out of rebellion. She acted out of revelation. She had heard of this God, the God who split the Red Sea, the God who dried up the Jordan, the God who delivered slaves and defeated kings. And somewhere between fear and faith, Rahab believed. Then, she spoke words that heaven would never forget. "I know that the Lord has given you this land. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and on the earth beneath." Joshua 2 verses 9-11. Think about it, these words didn't come from a prophet, not from a priest, not from a king, but from a woman everyone else had written off. In that moment, Rahab stopped being a woman of Jericho, and became a daughter of faith. She pleaded not for wealth, not for escape, but for mercy. "Swear to me by the Lord," she said, "that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you." And the spies answered with a promise that echoed like a vow between heaven and earth. "Our lives for yours." Then, she let them down by a rope through her window, the same window that once looked out on sin now opened toward salvation. That night, a rope became a covenant. Not woven by human hands, but by mercy. They told her, "Tie this scarlet cord in your window, and whoever is in this house with you will be spared." That cord wasn't just a sign, it was a symbol. A lifeline of faith. A quiet prophecy of the blood that would one day be shed for all. The same color that marked her home that night would mark across generations later. The scarlet cord of Rahab would become the scarlet grace of Jesus. And so, while Jericho's walls stood tall, Rahab's hope hung higher, a single thread of mercy swaying in the night wind. Because when faith meets mercy, the past no longer defines the future. And that scarlet cord still preaches today, that God remembers those the world forgets. The waiting and the promise. The two spies returned and their feet carried a single, trembling message back to camp: "God has given us the land." The whisper became a decision. The people would cross. The promise would move from words into steps. Joshua called the people to prepare, not for battle, but for holiness. He commanded them to purify themselves, to leave behind the ordinary and stand ready for the extraordinary. "Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you." Joshua 3 verse 5, those words were not a tactic, they were an invitation to trust. Imagine that moment, a million hearts on a riverbank, the Ark of the Covenant held high, priests wading into waters swollen with spring floods. The same God who stopped the sea for their fathers was about to do it again. The waters that had swept away their fear would step aside for their faith. As the people waited, leaders chose 12 men to carry a memorial out of the riverbed, 12 stones taken from the place the feet of God had touched. They would set those stones at Gilgal as a sign to future children that God had made a way. "So that this may be a sign among you," the story says, a visible memory for invisible grace. Joshua 4. And all the while, in the heart of Jericho, one window remained lit with a different kind of sign, a scarlet cord tied and swaying softly. Days turned to nights, and Jericho feasted as usual, music, trade, laughter under the indifferent sun. The city breathed as if nothing threatened it. But inside Rahab's house, every tick of the clock felt like a summons. Her scarlet cord was not a flag of safety to men, it was a quiet banner of faith before God. She had done what many thought impossible, she had chosen mercy over self-preservation and belief over belonging. While the city slept on its laurels, Rahab kept watch. Her window marked in red was a silent testimony that faith was alive in a city destined to fall. She had no army outside her door, only the promise of men who had seen God do wonders. She had no guarantee of safety, only the oath of 2 spies and a cord of hope. Then the miracle came, the Jordan parted. Dry ground stretched where flood should have been, God's people walked through as if across a remembered sea. Where fear had once stood like a giant, faith now walked in step. The 12 stones were gathered and placed, a teaching for later generations. Remember what the Lord has done. For Rahab, the crossing was a promise drawing near. The same God who had stopped water was the one who had visited her heart. Her waiting was not empty, it was charged with the power of a promise. The scarlet thread in her window was a quiet sermon that said, even in the middle of sin, mercy can be found. Even in the seat of pride, faith can stand. So the people crossed, and a memorial was raised. A woman kept watch. 2 simple acts, a public miracle and a private red thread, prepared the way for what would come next, the march around walls, the trumpets blast, and the fall that would prove mercy stronger than pride. The march around Jericho. The waiting was over. The time had come. Israel stood before Jericho, not with ladders or weapons, but with obedience. The strategy made no sense to men, but it was perfect to God. Joshua's command was simple. March around the city once each day for 6 days. Let 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns before the Ark of the Covenant. But do not shout. Do not speak. Keep silent, until the day I tell you to shout. Joshua 6 verses 3 to 10. So they marched. Day 1, the people of Jericho watched from their walls, mocking from above. No arrows were shot. No words were spoken. Only the sound of feet in dust and the deep hum of ram's horns echoing through the air. Day 2, the same. The soldiers of Jericho laughed louder, their pride unshaken. But inside, fear began to grow. For silence has a voice of its own, the voice of unseen power. Day 3, 4, 5, 6. Still no attack. Still no breach. The army of God walked in circles, and the city thought them foolish. But every step was faith in motion. Every circle was obedience wrapped in patience. Because sometimes, God's victory takes time. Sometimes, He tests whether our faith can walk in silence before it shouts in triumph. Then came the 7th day. The dawn was different. The air carried weight, holy weight. Joshua's voice rose, march around the city 7 times today. Round after round, the people marched. The priests lifted their trumpets, the ark glimmered in the morning light. From the walls, Jericho's watchmen stared, uncertain, mocking turned to murmuring, laughter to dread. And then, on the 7th round, Joshua lifted his hand. The priests raised their horns. And the silence broke. Trumpets cried, dust rose, and the pride of Jericho crumbled into dust. Walls that had stood for generations collapsed in seconds. What no army could conquer, obedience destroyed. What no sword could cut, faith shattered. The city trembled beneath the thunder of heaven. But amid the smoke, one house still stood, a single dwelling clinging to the walls remains. The home marked with a scarlet cord. The promise had not been forgotten. The same God who tore down stone kept standing one fragile window of faith. Rahab's home, untouched, glowed in the haze of ruin. A symbol that mercy always makes a way through judgment. The spies entered her house as they had promised. They found Rahab and all her family alive. And they led them out, safe, untouched by the destruction that had consumed their city. Joshua 6 verses 22 to 23. That day, Jericho fell. But faith rose higher than any wall. And as the dust settled, Rahab stood not as a harlot in hiding, but as a woman redeemed, standing on the promise of a God who never forgets those who trust Him. Because when the walls fall, only faith remains. And Rahab's scarlet cord still whispers through history. Obedience may look foolish, but it always wins. The rescue and new beginning. As the smoke of Jericho faded, a new story began. Not of walls and wars, but of grace. The cries of battle quieted. The mighty walls were gone. What once stood as a symbol of strength was now nothing but scattered stone. But in the midst of ruin, one promise still stood firm, a scarlet cord fluttering in the breeze. A mark that heaven had not forgotten. Joshua turned to the two spies and gave his command. Go into the prostitute's house. Bring her out, and all who belong to her. Just as you promised her. Joshua 6 verse 22. The spies, the very men Rahab had hidden, now became her rescuers. They found her home still standing, untouched by the chaos that swallowed the rest of Jericho. The cord that once hung as a secret signal now waved as a banner of salvation. Rahab stepped out from her doorway, trembling. Behind her came her father, her mother, her brothers, her sisters. Every soul she had pleaded for was alive. The ground around them was covered in ashes. But mercy had carved a path through the destruction. Not one of her family was lost. Not one promise was broken. The city of sin had fallen. But grace had raised a new household. The covenant of a scarlet cord had turned into a covenant of new life. They were led outside the camp of Israel. Foreigners, strangers, the unclean. But God had already written them into his story. For the same God who brings down walls also welcomes the willing. And when the time came, Joshua, Israel's faithful leader, honored the promise made in faith. He didn't see Rahab as a foreigner. He saw her as a testimony. For Rahab, this was more than survival. It was rebirth. She had walked out of a condemned city into the covenant people of God. Her past was buried beneath the rubble of Jericho. And her future began with the rising sun. Because God does not rescue to leave you the same. He rescues to begin again. And so, as the dust settled and a new dawn touched the land, the woman once known as Rahab the prostitute became Rahab, the redeemed. A living proof that mercy always keeps its promise. From shame to salvation. From the ruins of Jericho to the throne of David. From a scarlet cord to a crimson cross. Her faith stitched a thread through eternity. Rahab, the woman the world called unclean, became the woman heaven called chosen. She was welcomed among the people of God. And her story didn't end at the gates of Jericho. In time, Rahab married a nobleman of Judah, Salmon. A man whose faith matched her courage. Together, they built a home not on fear, but on the foundation of God's mercy. Their son's name was Boaz. The same Boaz who would one day look upon a foreign woman named Ruth, and love her with the same redeeming grace his mother once received. From Rahab came Ruth. From Ruth came Obed. From Obed came Jesse. And from Jesse came David. The shepherd who became king. The warrior who carried the promise of a coming Messiah. And many generations later, from the line of a once forgotten woman in Jericho, came the Savior of the world, Jesus Christ. The scarlet cord that once marked her window was only the beginning of a greater crimson story. The blood of Christ that would mark every believer for salvation. God turned a symbol of shame into a symbol of salvation. He took a woman despised by her city and made her a cornerstone of divine destiny. Because when God writes your name into his plan, your past no longer defines you. His promise does. Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed the father of Jesse. And Jesse the father of King David. Matthew 1 verses 5 to 6. Modern lessons and reflection. Rahab's faith began in whispers and ended in the Word made flesh. In a city condemned to fall, she believed in a God she had only heard about. No proof, no miracles, just a trembling hope that he was real, and that his mercy was wide enough even for her. Maybe you've been told your past disqualifies you. Maybe you feel like your name is forever tied to shame. But Rahab's story proves one unshakable truth. Right arrow faith redeems, not background. Right arrow obedience in secret is louder than rebellion in public. Right arrow your past does not cancel your calling. When everyone around her bowed to idols, she hid messengers of truth. When others mocked, she believed. When destruction came, her faith became her rescue. You don't need a perfect record, just a willing heart. Because the same God who saw faith in Rahab's fear still sees faith in yours. So if you feel forgotten, if you feel unworthy, remember this. Faith, even from the margins, can move heaven. Her story began in Jericho, but it lives on in everyone who dares to believe that God's mercy is stronger than their past. By faith the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. Hebrews 11 verse 31. Prayer and call to action. Let's pray. Lord, as Rahab believed in what she had only heard, help us to believe in what we cannot yet see. When fear surrounds us, teach us to trust your promises. When guilt whispers our failures, remind us that your mercy speaks louder. We pray for faith like Rahab's. Faith that stands even when the walls have not yet fallen. Faith that waits. Faith that believes that your grace still chooses the broken. Forgive us, Lord, for the times we've doubted your love or hidden from your call. Wash us clean, and hang your scarlet cord of mercy over our hearts. May it mark us as yours. May it remind us that redemption still runs through the ruins. Because the God who saved Rahab still saves those who dare to believe. Her story was not about what she did, but about who she trusted. Let us know in the comments how Rahab's story has spoken to your heart. What moment touched you most? And what other Bible stories would you like us to bring to life? Thank you for watching. And don't forget to subscribe. Because your faith journey deserves stories that remind you. Grace still redeems. God bless you.